Roger, you're on again. Roger, wake up. It's time to do the live stream. Roger!
Yeah?
Roger! Come on, it's time for live stream number 4. You gotta wake up.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, boy. I was dreaming.
Here we go again.
I was dreaming I was eating a big marshmallow. So that wasn't staged, was it? There you go.
A vegan marshmallow.
It was, yeah.
Those have improved a lot over the days, haven't they?
I suppose marshmallows have got gelatin in it, haven't they? I have no idea.
I think that's the main thing, yeah. I'm not a huge marshmallow eater myself, but occasionally get a nostalgic s'mores in American. We've sought out the vegan marshmallows.
You do that thing about toasting them, right? That's kind of like not part of
campfire thing, yeah.
Yeah, not part of proper people's culture at all.
Anyway, I'm sure everybody didn't join us today to talk about s'mores. So, so Roger here, I think he deserves a big round of applause because he's doing his fourth live stream of the day. My computer looks like it's doing its fourth live stream of the day, even though it's the first one. But this episode is going to be a little bit different today. The team show is going to be tomorrow at 6 p.m. and that's covering a brilliant topic. It looks like I've completely lost my camera. Are you frozen, Roger? Or are you just having a go at me?
Yeah, I'm just having a go at you.
So it does look like I have a bit of a camera issue, which I will see if I can work out. But
nice green screen there, Jeremy. Not like my one, which is not really a poster on the wall.
The wizard's house has been revealed. Maybe we'll do that now so that the video could actually keep up. But yeah, it's a little bit of a different one today. The team show is going to be pushed to tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time. But for today, we're going to be exploring the topic of is veganism a diet or not? But before we do that, there's a few bits of news that I'd like to get into. First of which, for those who have been following the Brexit situation, I know there's been a lot that has happened this year on top of Brexit. For instance, fires around the world. Obviously, the U.S. election, pandemic, and a lot else. But yes, Brexit is still an issue. And we'd just like to highlight a few clips here that kind of show how Brexit is actually affecting animal issues. So with that, with any luck, this will work.
Just to clarify, a clean break for you is leaving without any kind of deal with the EU?
No, not at all. A clean break means we retain our sovereignty, we make our own rules and regulations, we maintain good standards, and if anything, we've increased those standards. If you think about it, we've now banned the export of live animals. We couldn't do that when we were in the EU.
So there you have it. Apparently, the ban of live export was due to the Brexit move, which I didn't know that until watching this clip, which just came out a few days ago. And apparently there was a crucial vote scheduled for today that was going to determine a no-deal Brexit, which from what I understand would be a bit of a disaster, basically worst case scenario, which has now been pushed back, of course, with these things. The deadline doesn't actually mean it's the deadline. But yeah, live export. You have some experience with that, Roger?
No, I never did that. I was never a farmer, but you mean in terms of campaigning against it? Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Against, not for. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big campaign in Britain in the 1990s, which culminated actually with Jill Phipps being killed and all that, at the Coventry Airport. But that was interesting because the clip is showing really that the British government are going to use animal welfare as this kind of stick to beat the Europeans with by. That because it'll allow them to beat that drum about, we've got the best welfare in the world, that kind of thing that all governments and farming reps like to say. So it'll just be a really good way for them to do that, because they'll say we could never have done this if we were still part of the European community and stuff. So yeah, but in terms of live exports, that was a welfare campaign. I always say that you can understand that there are welfare components to it. The problem is if you present it as a welfare thing, it just ends up being welfare, with the slogan, on the hook, not on the hoof, which I suppose, ironically, is what will happen now. So British beef and all the rest of it will still go to Europe, but they won't, but not alive. So I suppose that's what it means, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. It's all that's the risk with animal welfare, and it's to me it's a bit of distraction because it almost says it's okay if we use them in this way, and it's not really campaigning against the end of their use. So it just makes us more comfortable with animal use, which do we really need that as a society?
Yeah.
Hello to everyone who's joined us.
Just a point about the live export campaign really in Australia, which I know a little bit about. That was interesting because obviously one of the welfare points about live export is that if you kill them at the local slaughterhouse, as it were, not that there's that many of those left, and then you take them to the port, that's obviously better than transporting to the port. But I mean, like in terms of Britain, even the transportation is fairly short. It's not these things that happen in North America and Australia where you've got these massive trucks. The kind of truck that kind of mowed down Reagan Russell, for example, these huge articulated lorries, right? Well, you don't have that in Britain. And so, because you just don't have that kind of freight situation. I mean, they're almost like trains driven by diesel, really, aren't they? I mean, they're huge things.
Still kind of focusing on the welfare and treatment, I guess. But just to say hello to everyone who's joined us, we've got Tone, Bernie, Deb. Hello, everyone again. My mom, Kristen. Roger's asleep apparently. Just catching up with that comment. Hello, Carolyn, UK vegan family, Nella. Be chatting with Nella tomorrow. You two had a great live stream this morning talking about kind of an introduction to rights and a few other live streams today as part of that VegFest UK online summit. With that, I think we might just move into the second.
Rights. What's this thing about only England and Wales? Is that true then? Do you know? So Tone's got only England and Wales. Scotland will so far be shipping cars to Spain still. So that's interesting. Does that mean that they transport them on the road for a long time, or do they leave a Scottish port and that means it's a longer sea journey? I mean, I don't know that detail. Not again. Interesting from a welfare point of view. From a
one may be worse than the other, but they're still not an animal rights point, are they?
No.
Well, I think along the same breadth, we have one more short clip from this interview that was relevant to animal issues that I thought was worth playing. So if we go ahead with that.
Okay.
With respect, I didn't ask where he should stand firm. I asked where the elements of concession were that you mentioned. Where should he give ground?
Well, I think the fishing issue is something that, as I understand, we are in lockstep. The government is in lockstep with our own commercial fishing organisations. Even if we got 100% access to our waters tomorrow, we don't have the size of fleet because of the common fisheries policy. We don't have the size of fleet. So maybe there's a little bit of ground there whilst we take time to build up the size of our fleet and fish our waters. But the sovereignty of our waters, the sovereignty of our position in not abiding by EU rules and regulations is absolutely paramount.
Well, there you have it. Apparently, the water does not belong to fishes and other water animals. It belongs to humans. Oh, you're muted.
So
I promise I didn't do that. Hands up. I didn't mute Roger. There's been times I've wanted to, but
everything's going well today. Well, I've got an excuse, but it sickens me really when they say in our waters, our territorial waters.
This super human centric, isn't it?
Yeah, because everyone in the water, according to that view, is property belonging to the country that the water is connected to. I mean, it's all bullshit, isn't it?
That's the critical analysis.
Yeah. That's about the best you can get.
Pretty much sums it all up. But yeah, a few language points I just wanted to point out in that clip. I thought it was interesting, the commercial fishing organizations versus, those who hunt fishes, I think is a better non-speciesist way to say that. One of my favorite points to make when it comes to this is around floating slaughterhouses, which I believe is a Joan Denaire point, if I remember correctly. But and to me, that moves past this kind of neutral language to actually developing new language that is more kind of anti-speciesist versus just kind of that, not having that speciesist undertone. But yeah, to me, these two clips to me underscore that human rights and animal rights are clearly entangled issues, as well as the politics. This is one of the biggest political situations going on in the world right now, and they're fighting over who can, has the right to hunt fishes in the nearby water. I just think it was an interesting point, and this is apparently one of the main sticking points for why there hasn't been a trade deal struck yet. So,
another language point is the fact that we make a point of saying, well, it might be grammatically correct to say fish, but it's more politically correct from an animal rights point of view to say fishers. And everybody's seen those trawlers bringing in those massive, huge, great nets, and they're just packed, with thousands of individuals. And then you've even got people walking on top of them and everything. And so it's in their interest, to just weigh them and never regard them as individuals. Whereas the political language that we produce is in order to reimpose the fact that you're talking about individuals here and you're violating their rights as individuals. So it's very important for us to not sharpen up on our language, but to just think critically about the kind of language we use and challenge the orthodoxy whenever it's expedient to do it, I'd say.
Yeah, and just a quick note, I don't know, this was news to me, but to Roger and everybody who's listening, happy belated International Animal Rights Day, which was apparently Thursday, the 10th of December. It's been going, this was the 13th year, I believe. But I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of unpack that a little bit. And we do have a clip from, actually, this was arranged by some friends of the show that go way back to our pub quiz days, about an event that happened in the largest city in the Philippines.
Those are the days, those pub quizzes, eh?
If you have your way, you'll have another pub quiz here soon.
Have a Christmas one.
All right. Yeah, could do. That would work. So here's this demo that just happened within the last week or so. There's no sound, so for this bit. So yeah, I quite like that. There is some interviews after that in a different language, which unfortunately won't be able to break down. But yeah, I thought that was good messaging, kind of end speciesism, go vegan, and animal liberation. So very animal-centric, mentioned speciesism, and obviously that solution focused on go vegan. Banner drops are, I think, a great way to get free advertising. I think there is a case to be made for paying for advertising, just from a scalability, and if we have the funds, it kind of makes sense, which is possibly another topic. But yeah, I thought that was a great way to celebrate International Animal Rights Day.
Yeah, I wonder if if the banner drop is legal, because it looked like they were covering over some existing billboards or whatever. So that in itself could be an issue, but that would be a civil matter. But I wonder whether there's been any example of a motorist being distracted by trying to look at a banner and then crashing,
That I think would be a hard case to make. I think the easier case to make would be what happens if somebody drops the banner and all of a sudden this massive banner's flying around and covering cars and the like. Because let's be honest, there's always advertising at the side of the road. You're not going to get someone saying a billboard caused a crash because I was reading this billboard. So hopefully that'd be pretty selective.
Well, they could argue. They could argue, because you know what capitalism is like for advertising. They could argue that the reason these walkways and bridges are free of advertising is for a reason, which they might have researched, for all I know. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think with any demo, particularly when it's a new demo that we haven't done before, it's good to research all these intricacies, what the legalities and also potential responses, both from the public and from the state, as it were, so that we can be prepared to defend ourselves against those. So I think on all those, it's a great idea. You got some banners. You got a new banner right behind you, don't you?
I do. What's the,
well, not new for the live streams, not necessarily a new banner.
Yeah, this is weather beaten. This is the banner, the main banner we have on our stall. So it kind of goes from the stall down to the floor, and it was done by a couple of great artists. I think we've been using it now for about 2.5 years. So it's been really good. It was first not coloured in, and it was quite striking, actually, just sort of black and white. And then we coloured it in, so it was pretty good. What's the
That,
score
that
with your?
banner's probably that banner's probably done a few hundred demos, hasn't it? If it's been 2.5 years, because you do what?
Oh yeah,
well,
yeah.
Pre-Corona days, 2-3 demos a
Yeah,
week.
this banner's done a lot of stuff. Yes. What's the score with your camera? Are you going to get it back or what?
You missed my green screen.
No.
Yeah, well, this is the raw green screen. Yeah, just while I'm sharing the screen, which we've got one more thing before we get into the main topic, and then once I'm done sharing, we'll pop it back up here and see if it works. But talking about International Animal Rights Day, I just think now this is shifting away from the demo to more a big picture view of the day in general. So this is completely different to that group's actions. But I just think it's interesting, the whole idea of an International Animal Rights Day. Do we think that's a good thing, or do we think that's maybe, what kind of message that send? I was saying to Roger before we started on this live stream, I can't imagine having an International Anti-Racism Day. So it's an interesting, when you juxtapose this with human issues. I think it's interesting to ask ourselves those questions. So let us know in the comments. Did you know it was International Animal Rights Day? And if so, do you think this is good for building awareness, or perhaps should we reconsider how we frame these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think World Vegan Day has kind of lost its meaning almost a little bit, hasn't it? Because of
and with animal rights kind of trailing veganism, that kind of begs the question. If it'll move to Animal Rights Month and then to the point where it's just kind of a year-round thing, hopefully. There was a quick thing. So this is, I'm not sure actually who fed the information to this. I'm guessing they kind of this website polls from multiple sources. But so this is just an interesting post I found about International Animal Rights Day, which for those of you who have been following our debate series, so this today is a little bit different. We're not going to be arguing with each other as much. This is more of the brand new kind of Hangouts with Hess and Yates is what we're branding this one.
Oh, yes.
Assuming we won't even want to use the word branding, which that's a discussion about species language in itself. But yeah, the question here. So go ahead, Roger.
I just thinking branding and the movement. Don't go there. Yeah.
Well, there's that too. Too. But yeah, we just had a recent a 2-part series, which I really enjoyed. I think it's probably been one of our more riveted discussions yet around whether or not we can have rights-based or welfare-based content, be it images or video. And here we have at the top of this post for International Animal Rights Day what I would consider a heavily welfare-based photo. I think both Roger and I and a lot of those listening would probably look at this and say, oh yeah, we need to end all use. However, to your average non-vegan, the question being, are they thinking end all use, or are they thinking, oh, I'm going to buy free range now? So that's the risk, I think, with this kind of imagery. So I'm still not sure if I have Roger convinced that there's such a thing as welfare-based content, but we're I might have to let that one go for a minute. And then just moving into the text, I just thought there's a few interesting things to point out here. At the Animal Rights Show, we focus a lot on respect, and I thought it was interesting how they coupled kindness with respect, which I think if we are looking at different claims to be making, that's one option versus just saying kindness, actually kindness and respect, if we're not comfortable moving all the way to just the respect line of thought.
What about abuse and use and abuse as well? That would fit into that kind of thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and another variation I use of that commonly is eat or use. Eating being and consumption being one of the most prolific forms of animal use, but use being a little bit more of a catch-all. So I do think there is a case to be made for combining some of these words. I personally would swerve the word abuse, even if it's coupled with the word use, because I think it still has, I'm not sure what it adds by. I'd rather use other words in place of it. But to that point, that also interesting is the cruelty and the killing, because I would consider cruelty to be more of welfarist language. We're sending people to non-cruel use. However, they do mention the killing, which I think is more of a rights-based point. There is a specific tie that I think can be made there around the right to life. But probably one of the more interesting things here is the 3 rights they chose to highlight. So I think Roger and I probably have different takes on both of these. Reagan has different takes, as well as a lot of other things I've seen from rights-based advocates. But here they're focusing on life, liberty, and natural enjoyment. I'll confess, natural enjoyment, I haven't seen that before. But to me, these all kind of miss the point, because most of the other animals who are being used shouldn't be bred in the first place. So it's not really about them having life or freedom, which, let's be honest, basically, very few other animals, like the Joan Daenerys quote you mentioned at an earlier session, Roger, they're all endangered being on the same planet with humans. So none are really free. Even other animals in sanctuaries aren't really free. And then I don't really know how to unpack that natural enjoyment, but it does sound like more of a welfare point to me.
Yeah, well, obviously, I don't think that's as problematic as the other bit, though. You know, the cruelty and killing thing, because I think that some people might read that as cruelly kill or something like that, and that would definitely lead them down a welfare path. You know.
Excellent point. Having the words in conjunction, that's similar to when people use the word it next to other animals, even though they don't mean to be referring to the other animal themselves. I think just having them in close proximity, it could, as we know, the range of interpretations is quite wide.
Yeah, it's easier done though, isn't it? Especially, I mean, it's easy doing when you're talking, isn't it? That's going to be one. Isn't that going to be one of our debates, Jeremy? I was saying that specialist language is not as prevalent as ableist language in society. Remember that?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. That I think would make it for a really good discussion. Besides, beyond who's kind of right or wrong, I think both of us kind of pulling together some examples and then both making a case for how prolific they are. I think probably we'll arrive at the conclusion that they're both quite ubiquitous within our language. But it'd certainly be a good discussion. Interestingly, everyone has just Googled, and apparently the 21st of March is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
Oh, wow.
So that day does exist. I mean, it's good to do those tests to juxtapose. And hey, I could be wrong. Maybe having these days of awareness is a good thing. At least it kind of pricks the consciousness a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a little bit supportive of your situation. I mean, it's a little bit like World Don't Commit Domestic Violence Day. I mean, you think, hey, come on.
I shouldn't laugh, but I'm obviously laughing at the absurdity of it. Yeah. Elliot just saying, a lot of people, I think if a lot of animal advocates, which is what I'm seeing here, that the Animal Rights Day isn't really that well known. Here's an interesting point that what if animal rights?
Who said so? Nobody told me. Who said it?
I missed the exclamation point. I don't know. It's on the internet, so it must be real, right? This is an interesting point. What if it couples with Human Rights Day? I don't know if there's, I guess we mentioned about the racial discrimination, but if there is a specific day to highlight human rights concerns, maybe coupling it with that would be quite a powerful effect, because as you explored in those earlier sessions today, I think a lot of, there's a lot to be said about human rights building upon animal rights, which we all share with other animals, both humans and other animals share.
Though, Jeremy, animal rights would include humans anyway. So, it would then have to be other Animal Rights Day or non-human Animal Rights Day, just to pick out the other animals,
Bernie's just raising a clever point about apparently the calf thing is a Tory trick. I'm not up on the news on that one, so it sounds like there might be a bit of conflicting information on this. Evelyn has an excellent point here.
I'm really shocked by that idea that the Tories could do anything devious. Now, come on.
Evelyn has an excellent point here, because this photo technically is free range. I mean, I appreciate that this might vary country to country, and there's all kinds of regulations around this. However, basically just means one big cage, doesn't it? I think now from a consumer perspective, I think they might think free range means, surrounded by grass and these lush pastures that you can go and explore. So yeah, that gap between reality and consumer.
Yeah. There's hatches down the sides, right, and they open them out, and then some of the chickens can move out into the open. But sometimes the fence on the other side is so close, you've only got a little thin area anyway. And I think the research suggests that none of the birds in the middle make it to the to the outdoors.
No hope. Yeah, it's a bit of an empty promise, isn't it? And my mom just raises an interesting point. According to that picture, it was International Animal Welfare Day. So I think this to me kind of articulates the point of where our content needs to line up with our language. To me, why not have a picture of one individual, be them a chicken or whoever, versus this just mass where you can't even see an individual. It's just this massive,
No, actually, I imagine stuff. A lot of people would. That's obviously a stock photograph. I'm not quite sure if you went to a focus group and just showed people the the headline in the kind of time frame that people kind of skim through a magazine or something or a newspaper. I'm not quite sure that they'd actually register what that was.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To me, I think pictures of the individuals, and this is what I try to do through my content of individuals telling the story at Sanctuary and so forth, is close-ups of their faces. And I think particularly their eyes tell more than I could ever say with my words. So that's really become the focus of my advocacy, and just those facial expressions. And it brings me back to that Go Vegan World, the press appearance that Sandra Higgins, the starter of that, said that her opposition on that said, oh, people are very clever with their photography and showing that other animals, it makes it look like they're showing emotion. It's like, since when is emotion a human only feeling? Like it's like the cameras aren't doing this, they are showing emotion. Like, anyway, that's.
Well, that goes back all the way to Darwin. I mean, Darwin made some extraordinary claims about other animals, about them showing things like envy and rage, jealousy, and that kind of thing. Going back to Pamela from Animal Justice Emergencies talking about the banner drop.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah. I think that's a really important point. Yeah, hello, Pamela. I think that's a really interesting point because that's something we talked about on the Zoom calls kind of before we migrated over to StreamYard, is the challenges that different countries face to different political campaigning environments. I guess it ties along with those bans. When we ban something from one country and it moves to another country, are they actually going to be able to ban it there and so on? But I think, very courageous. I agree. I think activism to begin with is, and I think you just layer the political situation on top of that. It's, inspiring on many levels.
Yeah, it creates an interesting thing because, often if you've been arrested on a demo or something, you're tempted to go, this is not a goddamn democracy and this kind of stuff. But then when you go to somewhere where there's no, right to protest and that kind of stuff, where you'd actually probably be shot if you
mean like London?
Or
they Section 14 Extinction Rebellion, of which Animal Rebellion was a part of, and banned their right to protest. So, I mean, not to dilute your point. I think obviously some countries have it worse than others, but.
And of course, if you're a person of color as well, particularly a black person in certain countries, you've got a problem because you'd probably be singled out for special treatment, I would think. Yeah,
in quotes. And here's just, it looks like it might have been a bit of an inspiration from the talks through the VegFest online summit today. Pamela's just saying, I'm starting to think we need a bit more expansion of the whole rights position. In one way, it seems quite simple and straightforward. I'd agree with that. To me, I mean, at the fundamental level, it's a focus on the individual and that they're worthy of respect, which means not breeding, using, or killing them. So at that point, and you'll notice I didn't mention rights in any of that, but.
Well, I think I'm trying to line up a live stream with Pamela on some of the issues that come up recently, and maybe people.
Welcome, Jennifer. We'll forgive you for being a bit late today. Just this once.
No, we won't. No, we won't. So, if I can make 4, you can make 1 without being late.
Yeah, for those of you who just joined us, this is Roger's 4th live stream, so. Any glitches on my end are my fault, but he gets a bit more leeway today. Yeah, but here's another just a human-based day, just for comparison's sake. Elimination of violence against women. 25th of November, apparently. So there's a lot more days in these than it appears.
No, but to go to your point, Jeremy, that's actually quite odd, isn't it? To have a day. I mean, I suppose it's kind of gives us a chance to highlight it, but I mean, it also, in a way, it gives the media an excuse not to cover things, or it's not your day or something. It's a bit weird to me, that one.
Yeah, and this is a point about the free range. Regardless of their kind of living conditions, they all wind up being killed. But just to clarify, I think my mom's just been outed as our secret donor. What do you think? Have some discussions around that one. Well, before we get too lost, I think if we weren't already, we are about halfway through our time. I suppose we should probably start talking about the main topic of the day. What do you think?
If you insist.
So the topic for today is the Veganism.
Hey, you're back.
Is it a diet?
I was going to say you should have taken up ventriloquism. You never moved your lips during all that.
Was my image frozen too?
Yeah, all the time, all that time. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
You're,
All
you're,
right, we're gonna have to debrief on that one.
yeah, you're only just. I thought you do because I did that thing of being still, and you said, "Are you taking the mick?" And I said, "Yeah." So you.
Well,
were still,
it's been moving on my end, but anyway, maybe there's a few more bells and whistles. Maybe we'll have to take some of those out for next time. But veganism, is it a diet? What do you think, Roger? Should we just say it's a diet and sign off now?
Yeah, it's a diet. Yeah, it's a diet. Yeah.
All right, well, there you have it. Veganism is a diet. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah.
We'll see you next.
The idea it's a philosophy and about justice and all that. That is just pie in the sky nonsense.
Lies. You
Very,
purist,
very-
extremist, you.
Yeah.
I bet you're against racism all the time too, aren't you?
Yeah, and child molestation. I'm against it
Yeah,
all the time.
that's a huge Reagan point that he makes against utilitarianism, which is the foundational values of the movement, whether we like them or not, through that cruelty, abuse, suffering language. That's all inherited from that Peter Singer utilitarian philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we were talking about that before, weren't we? Because I mean, it's interesting, in terms of in terms of the people in the chat now. My experience nowadays is that a lot of people have not read Singer nowadays either. Whereas it used to be the case where everybody read Singer, or at least owned the book Singer, Animal Liberation, even if they haven't actually kind of read it. Whereas nobody had ever read or even owned, Tom Reagan's book. And one of the reasons for that is that Singer's book was heavily promoted by the animal rights movement, whereas Reagan's book wasn't. And again, there's arguments about why that was. I mean, the case, as you know, Jeremy, it's not as easy to read as Animal Liberation. Also, I think a social movement would probably like Animal Liberation because it's quite a lot of graphic language and it explains animal use in a graphic way. So I imagine the social movement might think, well, that's going to affect people. They think they're going to read a philosophy book and then suddenly they get the details of animal use kind of thing. So I think there was a lot of reasons why the one book was approved and favored, not least the fact that it came out a lot earlier. So that was a massive advantage for Singer over Reagan.
Yeah, it does beg the question if the rights case had been made, and I'm not sure if it has to this. I'm reluctant to say this because I feel like I need to think about it more. I'm not sure if a very basic approach has been made. I mean, some of Francio's writings probably one of the most straightforward, I would say, from a rights-based perspective that's in existence today. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, but it gets lost in the crowd though. It's the same as if you were a spokesperson, you go to a journalist and say, I stand for animal rights. They don't really know what that means. And so they then say, okay, so tell me about your campaign against animal cruelty. See, because they, and also in some senses, what we would need to do if we were to take the idea of getting rights on the agenda, we would almost have to try in retrospect to pick up on the journalist after the event, because they're always going to be tempted just by habit almost of translating rights into welfare. So you'd have to write to them again and say, kind of polite message, our thing was rights and all that. The problem is we can't even get that consistency in the movement. So it seems to me that it's a bit of a lost hope to expect for journalists to be able to get it when the movement can't.
Yeah, and I think just to tie it into the, is veganism a diet perspective, to me, animal rights is the, in a specific way, a bit more of a deeper dive into the philosophy of veganism. So I think when we're talking about how to get animal rights injected, to me, that's basically underscoring how to get the veganism as a philosophy more underscored. I think Pamela's got an interesting point here. I find with animal rights, when I try to figure out how to make it more compelling, or give more examples, I slightly go blank. I think this is a really important thing to analyze as the animal rights show, as everybody watching here, and as a movement. If we can't, put across the rights base very easily, then if we can't put that case across, I think we need to reevaluate things. I know for me, I've kind of moved more towards the language and focusing on an individual. I mean, I think a simple thing for all of us to do to start is I think we've all, if we haven't been to Sanctuary, and hopefully we have, and connected with an individual there, hopefully we've at least seen videos online where we could have say we've done that, and start talking about our experiences with those individuals. And, do we think they're unique? Do we think they're worthy of respect? And those types of things. And then if we want to make a rights-based point, we can talk about whether or not they have interests, rights being a way of protecting those interests, or as, Roger slash, I appreciate this from Reagan, talks about the wall or fence around protecting the individual, and that, to breed, kill, or use them
No,
is
that was
a
my idea.
violation.
Totally Roger Yates. That copyright.
Definitely
Roger.
not Reagan. Nothing to do with Reagan. Just stamp out that legacy. That's what
Yeah,
the Animal Rights Show is all about, right? Stamp out the legacy of Tom Reagan.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we could do a whole episode on kind of examples for, we've kind of started to do that with the Objection of the Week, which we're doing here and there now. Maybe get some more examples of how to actually put the rights-based case across.
Well, that's what we did our little role plays for, though, wasn't it? That little series of role plays.
Yeah, the Objection of the Week, right.
Yeah, again, Animal Justice Emergency said, can't cruelty be part of a rights discussion? That's an interesting one, because that does lead into something that we don't agree on, which is the idea that, I always say, no words are banned, whereas you would actually try to kind of eliminate some words, right? Like cruelty, probably.
I know for me, there's words I banned for myself. I wouldn't necessarily tell someone else they shouldn't use them, but I think as a movement, we're going to be better off when we seriously consider why we're using them. To your point earlier on in this this article, if we're talking about cruelty and killing, could they actually interpret that as cruel killing, to your point, and then all of a sudden that becomes seeking out a way to kill them in a non-cruel way? So that to me is where the inclusion of cruelty could just make our jobs harder, versus setting a clear objective.
There's no doubt about it. If you want clarity and to stop people automatically jumping to that type of interpretation, you've then got to not use that language. Otherwise, whenever you do, the kind of culture will go, aha, I know about this. I agree with that. Yeah, I'm on board with you. And, so tell me all about free range. That's what goes on in the culture's head, if you like. And you see that replicated on people on the street, where they're all, like people used to come in the early days of VIP, people used to come up and they would walk up to us and literally say, all right, then, well, tell us what we can eat. What's humane, right? And we go, whoa, and so you've got to start from, ground up, and start again. But again, we've got that thing. And I always say that story about the banner, putting the banner up. And this guy said that it was inaccurate because things are not that cruel. And I said, well, our position is not based on cruelty. Our position is based on rights. And he said back to me, putting the banner up, no, it isn't. So he was telling me that my position was cruelty because that's what he understands. And that's what he hears all the time. And presumably he might have, seen some coverage or even a video or something. And he's heard the animal rights people talk about cruelty. And so he was almost like saying, well, yes, your position is anti-cruelty. That's the animal rights position. And that's the mess we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, and I think just pulling things back to kind of the theme of this episode, that is veganism a diet thing. Promoting veganism as a diet is dangerous because it can lead people to obsess and develop eating disorders. Then they start eating animals and blame their ills on veganism. There's a lot to unpack with that. I know when it comes to eating disorders, I know for me, my go-to would be recommending someone seek out a consult with a dietitian. I know I don't have the expertise to advise someone else on an eating disorder. So I think it is to that point, we don't want to link veganism as a cure-all for these woes because there's some complex issues. But yeah, the health side of it, the full definition, which we've unearthed a bit as the Animal Rights Show, the 88 definition does say for the benefit of human health, but that fundamental point is the animal rights point, which is really what we're focusing on as a show and for the topic today.
Can you put Cranky's first one up there, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we talked about animal liberation.
Hello, Jake. Welcome to the show.
This is Peter Singer, for people who don't know, and he's a utilitarian philosopher, which is a consequentialist. And so he wrote that book, and it came out in 1975. Interesting. There's a new article out by the Vegan Strategist, and he puts the date at 1985, so he even gets that wrong. Anyway, now, so yeah, he's kind of pro vivisection. If it's in a nuanced way, but he also says in the book that for reasons of the fact that he thinks that other animals are okay about being killed, but not being made to suffer. So a painless death of another animal is not really a problem for Singer because they're replaceable. And so he said that he doesn't really see a moral problem with free-range egg production. That's actually a line from Animal Liberation, and he's always had that. But I mean, the interesting thing about Singer and about Reagan and about Ronnie Lee is they all set out to do the same thing. What happened was Ronnie met his sister's boyfriend who was vegetarian, and Singer met some vegetarians in Oxford, and Reagan started working on animal rights around about the same time, which was 1973-ish, right? And Reagan says in the case that he actually intended to defend the use of other animals in research in the case for animal rights. He was going to defend that. What Singer set out to do was prove that these vegetarians that he'd met in Oxford were wrong. And that's what Ronnie had set out to do, that his sister's boyfriend was wrong. So they all went through the same process. And it was Singer, of all the three, who ended up still supporting some types of animal use, whereas the other two realized, whilst they worked it through logically and everything, that you actually had to stop animal use full stop. And so Reagan suddenly realized that he couldn't actually do what he thought he was going to do, which was kind of critique the use of other animals except for vivisection.
Which, to Jake's point, I think a huge reason for the confusion in the movement is these inconsistencies early on, and they've almost, I guess it's quite vegan to say, mushroomed since then. You know, they've gotten worse, I think, in a lot of ways. You'd think they'd get better, but I think we're further away from the theory than we ever have been.
Mushrooms have rights.
Well, I think back to the, veganism is a diet thing. I mean, Nella has a strong point here. Something I always hear is that people think that vegans are doing it because it's trendy. Now, I don't know if anybody here watching this can appreciate this, but I know I didn't do it because it was trendy. I get a lot more crap about it than usually when you're doing something because it's trendy. That means you're doing something that's likable or, to fit in with the crowd. That to me is the opposite of trendy. But I have heard that to that point. Because to me, I mean, back to the whole diet thing, and we're shifting back to veganism, which I do think is different to animal rights. But to me, the focus of veganism is a diet. However, the scope is obviously all forms of animal use, seeing other animals as individuals, and then drilling into that philosophy of animal rights. So it really goes back to, Roger, your focus scope thing.
Yeah, also, of course, actually to address the question that we're supposed to be addressing directly.
Only took us 45 minutes. We'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, I mean, like the slogan "veganism is not a diet" is accurate, except it's not really that helpful.
It's not only a diet. The only, I think, is necessary.
Well, yeah, that's right. But also the fact is, like it or not, there's a huge dietary aspect to veganism, eat like you care and all this stuff, right? And so whenever people think about veganism and whenever vegans talk about what the problem is, in the kind of social problem sense and the claims making sense, we identify a problem. And of course, we all say, well, the biggest part of that problem is that other animals are eaten, because that is the thing that violates the most rights, by several hundreds of millions. I mean, we in terms of numbers of individuals, the actual consumption of them, of their flesh is a massive source of rights violations. So there's bound to be that thing. And so I think that what we need to do then is, in the same way as if we want to make the animal rights case, you have to be very careful about leaching into anything to do with animal welfare and cruelty. We would
nothing against leeches, though.
No, leaking into, yes. Yeah, John Denayer would have me by the neck by then. But you know, in the same ways, when we're talking about veganism, and we are talking about the dietary aspects, we need to figure out ways of underlying the fact that that's not all we're talking about. And so the idea that, yes, focus and scope, but we've got to keep mentioning the scope just to keep the contextual you know, thing going, really, you know, in the sense that we need to be able to contextualize veganism as a whole, even while we're focusing, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, that's important, that we can kind of come into the you know, the micro of the focus, but we've always got to have the macro of the scope kind of hanging around there like a bad smell, and we've got to keep pointing towards it and keep alluding to it. Otherwise, the focus, I mean, like there's some groups in the movement who want to make the focus the scope. We know that, right? And that would be a misuse of veganism.
And I think maybe I can just make a few quick language points, and then we can talk about some examples around this that I jotted down in advance. I mean, I think a term we often hear is vegan food. I'd like to see us move more towards animal-free food, because that's animal-centric, and it's also you know, it's moving the focus over we vegans aren't doing this, and versus, you know, the other animals being in focus. Also, instead of just saying we're vegan, you know, just along a similar line, saying we oppose animal use. You know, if someone's in a restaurant saying, "Oh, are you vegan?" You know, it's easy to say yes, I'm vegan, and then that's the end of the discussion, versus actually being able to make an animal-centric point. But then also, you know, as a you know, the vegan diet thing, I like to refer to the dietary aspects of veganism. So it is obviously part of it, but it's not, you know, not the whole thing, which it can be difficult. I mean, I saw something just the other day about, you know, a vegan diet helps with XYZ. And I think it's challenging to reframe some of these things, because when you think of a title for an article's headline, to say the dietary aspects of veganism can help be a bonus effect of this, like to say things actually the way I would want to say them, all of a sudden the heading's, you know, 4 lines long, and it's longer than the article almost, you know, it's.
Yeah, I mean, like, we are, I mean, it's really interesting. I wonder whether there's going to be any research, there probably is research by now, about the effect that Twitter has had on claims making, because there's this kind of need to kind of bring everything down to a sound bite, and this kind of need that we seem to, because nobody's going to wait for us to explain anything in any kind of depth, and there are some things we just can't really get away with just a sound bite. When we're deep in we're talking about, you know, deeply socialized issues, which are, you know, these norms and values are transmitted generationally, and we're supposed to cut through all that with a soundbite. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Oh, it's super difficult, and especially for taglines for campaigns, when you're really down to maybe 2, 3, 4 words max in some cases to really get the point across. I mean, I support a vegan support program, which even that, you know, I suppose it's a vegan support program, but really it is focusing on the diet. However, there are the broader ethical issues that are brought into that over that period. But it's difficult because it is very much about these are the recipes. But I think if we're real here, I don't know how it was for you, but I know for me, the question I had is, you know, what am I going to eat now? Which it sounds like you've had on the street. So I think we'd be to just swerve that and say, oh, it's not a diet. I think we're actually missing an opportunity to support someone to start to learn about the dietary aspect of veganism.
Yeah, the dietary aspect is a good way of doing it. And in fact, I mean, that's, isn't it? It says in the weak vegan society kind of definition that we're all lumbered with, it's got in dietary terms, hasn't it, as part of of that. So it's kind of getting to that. One little quote that Kristen just came up with is that for some people, diets is about losing weight. That's how in my generation you would think of the word diet. You know, I'm on a diet. People would say, right?
Plenty of people gain weight, you know, and I see, you know, obviously that's kind of their decision to do that. You know, I don't, you know.
No, but the phrase "I'm on a diet" meant I'm trying to lose weight.
And it does make it, yeah, it's very much about the human who's vegan, who's on a diet. Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Well, I regret this, actually. You know, it says, I always get that wrong, don't I? It says here, free samples of vegan cheese. We struggled with that a lot. Should that be plant-based? I mean, it's interesting. Sandra Higgins from Go Vegan World, I don't know whether she still does it, but she used to say plant diet, not plant-based diet. And
yeah, I agree. What's the based mean?
Yeah, and then because some people said, oh well, in that case I can eat a little bit of flesh because if I'm still plant-based, they can.
Better spinach with the cow flesh on top. It's plant-based.
Yeah. And then Neil Robinson, who was the first vegan professional footballer, he played for that terrible team called Everton that Tim Barford supports, and he came up with the phrase plant exclusive diet, which is, I suppose, a bit more of a mouthful, but it then kind of knocks the based bit out, and you're replacing it with exclusive. So you're actually saying there's nothing else besides plant. Although some smart Alex then go, oh, does that mean that you can't have salt and this kind of stuff, minerals and that kind of thing? So,
well, and just a quick point, and then there's a lot of comments I'd like to try to get through.
Go on then.
Yeah,
you do it. You do it.
What one of the big messages?
I'll go back to sleep.
One of the big messages that I think we've all probably been hearing is the whole eating animals causes pandemics. I mean, my first critique would be that's a vegetarian message, and it's also feeds into this whole thing of veganism as a diet. It's that human centric. We shouldn't use other animals because we're going to get sick. That's not an animal rights point. It might be from a human animal perspective, but it's certainly not from a comprehensive animal rights perspective. Which that was our first show we did together as part of the animal rights show, wasn't it? Our pilot episode, I think, navigating the coronavirus campaigning. I think there's something to be said about it, but it's just careful how we frame it.
Yeah, eating other animals damages the environment. See, that's more of an animal rights point because we talk about habitat, then, aren't we? I mean,
talking about their homes as well as ours, as long as it's framed in that way. Seb Alex just did a recent video that's really good around how to make an environmental point that's still animal centric.
Seb Alex, folks. Seb Alex is putting out some brilliant stuff lately.
I go to those videos consistently for inspiration. Yeah. It just makes sense, and it's outside of the box too, which I think is something kind of hard to find these days. I don't know if we're going to try to keep this thing to an hour, but or if we do it in the favorite comments. I know you've had a long day, Roger. This comment here I think could easily take us to the hour mark. But basically, whether or not a pro-vivisection is inconsistent with utilitarianism. The quick point I would make around that, and I think this goes back to the philosophical discussion we had on the Animal Rights Show Zoom-based edition, that it's utilitarianism is more about the equality of interests, whereas the rights-based view is more about the equality of individuals, specifically their valid claim to basic moral rights. So when you're just looking at the interests, and this is where it gets into that utilitarian calculus, utilitarianism and Singer himself makes the case for animal testing. We could probably do a whole episode around that, but talking about the resultant terror is worse amongst humans because they know it's coming if we're randomly testing on humans, whereas other animals, don't have that same level of cognitive ability. So incredibly ableist and speciesist there. So that's justifying a case for animal testing, basically. So
yeah, but to be fair to Singer, Jeremy, he does say, there's a lot of caveats, and you've got to do a lot before it's justified. For example, even the researchers should ask the question, can this test be done on myself, rather than so it's not a carte blanche kind of support for vivisection by any means, Singer.
It's put through a filter, but it's a pretty speciesist filter, if you ask me. And I never thought I'd hear you say, to be fair to Singer. It's just it's clearly been a long day for you.
No. Well, funny enough, on the issue of interspecies sexual assault or bestiality, that Singer got into terrible hot water with this heavy petting article that he did, where he kind of defended humans. Didn't really defend it, but he kind of, I'm not sure what language to use here, but he kind of justified, or at least not approved of. He kind of didn't critique too much the idea of humans having sexual relationships with some other animals. And he was talking about the large mammals and stuff. And Tom Reagan really had a go at Singer. But I actually, for that issue, I thought Singer had some good points. Just kind of technical. I mean, he was making technical points about the size of cows and horses compared with humans, if you get my drift, without me being too graphic about it, right?
You probably already. We probably already said too much.
Yeah, this is X-rated now, folks. 18.
Yeah. Well, I'm just catching up on a few of these comments. Welcome to those who have joined us. Welcome, Grumpy Vegan Granddad. This is an interesting point. Is it too late to separate the vegan diet from a plant-based diet? I mean, I think if we look at a lot of the damage that's already been done, I mean, the I don't know if we want to call it the vegan movement has already been reduced to diet in the mainstream. And animal rights as a philosophy, not rhetorically, but as a philosophy, has all but been lost. So to me, I think we should still work to regain some of these things.
It's very important that we do that, especially when we're talking about the kind of Hollywood kind of celebs, you know, your Arnold Schwarzeneggers and your Bill Clintons and all that caper, because they themselves say they're on a plant-based diet or a plant-heavy diet or whatever, and the vegan movement are trying to say they're vegan, you know, and again, I mean, the vegan strategist makes the point, you know, isn't it good that Bill Clinton is regarded as a vegan, even though he eats other animals and fishes, you know? And I mean, he got caught out really, really well. I mean, I said, look, I love telling this story. He said to the audience, one of his workshops that you have to pay for, he said to the audience, you know, what's wrong with the idea of calling Bill Clinton a vegan? And somebody said, well, he eats tuna. And he goes, yeah, but he eats tuna. But, you know, can you see the advantage of that? And the guy goes, what, for the tuna?
Exactly. When we forget the animal-centric framing,
the vegan strategist just went red, you know, because he got completely caught out by an on-rights point. Because obviously he was thinking
there's more vegans.
Yeah, there's more vegans who are not actually vegan.
Just lowering the bar.
Yeah, it's this bar of entry thing. So if you were to, I mean, the strategy, the pragmatist strategy is to redefine veganism to mean vegetarianism. And that then means there's going to be a lot more vegans. Well, obviously that is true, but they're not vegan. But, you know, their idea would be, well, you know, it still makes the vegan movement bigger, and that's progress in their eyes, right?
Yeah, and I'll just probably round up these comments because we're coming up on the hour, and we do like to be
I'll shut up. You just go for it, Jeremy.
Not at all, but just I know you've had a long day too. We don't want you to lose your voice either. But Deb's just made another point around the problem with veganism simply being interchangeable with a plant-based diet. Is that we start supporting companies like Kentucky Fried Chicken selling, you know, vegan McNuggets. It's funny. I just clicked on me. You know, even the name Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, chicken is a speciesist way to refer to a chicken or chickens, isn't it? Because all of a sudden they're lumped into some group, some, you know, renewable resource instead of the individual. But more to the point, it's kind of like your vegan cheese point. You know, vegan McNuggets. Someone doesn't align with the idea of veganism just because they're putting a vegan, you know, KFC nugget in their mouth.
I had a prolonged when I was representing Vegan Island. This is back in something like 2011, maybe 2010. I had a long debate with somebody from Atheist Island, and he was talking about chicken, and I was talking about chickens. And it was really interesting the fact that, you know, our language was completely different, because every time you said chicken, I said, "You mean chickens?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those subtle things. I mean, I put the banner up earlier, but the Unlearning Species This Language group on Facebook is phenomenal for getting new ideas. And even if you just dip in and out of it, I just know that's a great way to get us thinking about these things, because I know every day something comes across my mind that's like, oh, actually, what are the undertones here? And really challenging ourselves, I think, is important. This is interesting around. I'm not familiar with this name, Zizik. As far as vegan philosophy, I might have to look into them. That Pamela is recommending here.
Oh yeah.
And Linda's just raised an interesting point here that getting kicked out of teaching public schools for showing a video on factory farming from YouTube, which is I mean that's terrible that happened.
That means
it goes to show some of the resistance we're up against, just trying to build awareness. Obviously.
Yeah, but does that mean fired as a teacher or kicked out of being able to go there as it were an animal advocate? So it's a bit ambiguous.
I suppose it could be either one. I would guess the former, but not entirely sure. And this is just a clarification around just just inconsistencies with the movement in general. It was more of the point being made around animal liberation. Tom has an interesting point to you around mushrooms, Roger. Apparently mushrooms do have rights. In some UK forests, you're not allowed to pick wild mushrooms. So technically Roger is right. Mushrooms do have rights. That could be a t-shirt, couldn't it? Mushrooms have rights.
Yeah, solidarity with fungi, folks.
More to the point of the session, I think around vegan diets, the terminology vegan diet, not being a bad thing to be on a plant-based diet, assuming they're, vegan, as they will search out, vegan food and come across the animal rights as documentaries and YouTube and such pop up. I think that's good as an entry point. I guess the danger to your point, Roger, that you said earlier is when we frame it as that's the entire thing. I think that's when we're limiting ourselves. But yeah, I think it sounds like Pamela does a similar thing to us around a dietary component to veganism. Great interaction here. I think this to me is the highlight. And do you want to talk a little bit about what you're planning for Christmas? Roger has like a bit of you might have to reevaluate after your 4 live stream day today, but you're planning, did I hear you correct on your video that you're planning to do 6 hours straight on Christmas Day?
Yeah, I was thinking about starting about lunchtime and just going as long. Well, I was going to hope to get you involved to maybe take over for an hour. But I was thinking of doing that. Maybe Michelle could come on, Grumpy Vegan Grandad, all these kind of people, and just have and kind of drop in and out type thing. And really, but the real thing, well, in fact, I was really touched by the fact that Grumpy Vegan Grandad made a video only a few days ago, and Michelle mentioned it, where it's all about these anti-vegan trolls, and people do get worn down. Even somebody as tough and grisly as Vegan Grumpy Grandad was saying, he got worn down by these attacks on you all the time, talking about his eyes and all this kind of stuff. And of course, this is what we get all the time, but also it's what people get in their family. Their siblings are having a go at them all the time. Their parents are having a go at them all the time. And so Christmas, and especially it's a weird Christmas, obviously, where you might really be kind of in your family group and expected to be there, because you can't be extended family and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it'd be quite good just to create a safe space for vegans, especially probably new vegans or recent vegans who might feel a bit lonely. And also geographically, there are some people who are still the only vegan in the village. It's easy to forget that, I think. And so I wanted to try and create just a hangout space where those people who are alone and the rest of the family are chowing down on animal flesh and ripping birds apart and all the rest of the shite that goes on. I just thought it'd be good to create a safe space that they can come along to and just be in the company of other vegans who get them, who understand, that when they see that news item, turkey's this and turkey's that, and that they'll get it on the vegan level. That it's kind of like unspoken, whereas if you bring it up with your family, it's going, well, what's wrong with that? All the stuff that goes on. I mean, family politics can be tough at the best of times. But for an isolated vegan, I really kind of feel for them. So I want to try and do something for them if possible. That's what it is.
Yeah, and I think some of these comments are too good to miss. So if you're up for it, I think maybe if we extend this maybe another 10 minutes or so, just so we can cover off some of these, because Elliot's raised an interesting point, because I know this is something that keeps coming up. And I think part of it, the Vegan Society has recently updated their website. And I know this is something we've looked at as a show, to actually move the definition up to the top of the website, because people were conflating the heading with actual definition. And Elliot's just saying, I feel that part of the definition contradicts the rest of the definition. And I assume that's the part that says, paraphrasing here, by extension of avoiding the exploitation and cruelty to other animals, that it's also for the benefit of humans and the environment. That's obviously a paraphrase. You can go to the Vegan Society's website for the full version. Well, I'm not sure how a definition can contradict itself. To me, it goes back to that focus and scope thing. The focus is other animals, which I think everybody, for the most part, bar a few exceptions, agrees with that. And that latter part to me is just speaking to the scope, that there are going to be other benefits and other issues that are entangled that we have to be aware of through our campaigning, which focuses on other animals.
Yeah, there is something to be said about, for people who are relatively new to the movement, understanding why this this definition that we all work with and are kind of lumbered with it to some extent even exists. And what it was, and I mentioned this in one of the Tim Balfour sessions, Arthur Ling wanted to professionalize the vegan movement, and it was a bit shambolic when it started. And I always make that joke about, Kathleen Janaway used to have the Vegan Society in her house, and the in-joke was that her house was in Leatherhead, which is an English town, right? And so the Vegan Society headquarters was in Leatherhead of all places, right? But Arthur Ling was saying, look, we can't go on like this. We're gonna need to kind of become more professionalized, and we need to kind of stabilize the society. And so this definition is part of that. And so it was to do with memorandum and articles of association. And so they became a limited company, and they became much more formal as an organization. And so whilst your Donald Watsons, your Leslie Cross could just speak from their heart, they were more like moderating things a little bit, just to kind of fit in with this kind of more corporate kind of thing. And of course, that's what social movement theory says about social movements, that when you professionalize, you moderate. It's just kind of part of the process that goes on. And unfortunately, the vegan society definition that we all work with is not very good compared with some of the earlier statements that were much tougher and shorter even. I mean, Donald Watson's got a great one, that the object is to stop exploitation. I know that's an issue, but to stop exploitation against all sentient life. Like it's just ironically, it's like a soundbite. It's really kind of clear and concise. That's much better than the long definition, I think.
Well, I think there's some interesting counterpoints to what we're saying, because I think we're kind of both pushing to move beyond the diet framing, whereas it seems like there's a lot of comments saying, is this such a bad thing? And the Grumpy Vegan Granddad says, is having food that's tasty being associated with vegan, is that necessarily such a bad thing? That's a challenging question, because, if we stop referring to vegan, all of a sudden, how do we get people to think about veganism if we're strict about, in what context it can be used? So I don't think there's any perfect answers here.
That is a very challenging point. And of course, like everybody loves that. You go into these shops and supermarkets, you see these vegan signs everywhere. And obviously it kind of gives you a bit of a boost, doesn't it? Whereas if it was plant-based, it wouldn't be quite the same, I suppose. It's just that it does kind of push against the other problem with it, though, so it's not easy.
I like Sandra Higgins' just plant to confirm that it is the whole thing. It's not just the base of it, or just animal free, because then we get back to that animal centric framing, but that doesn't have the same marketing zing, does it? Here's a question. I mean, if does the definition shift over time? If most non-vegans think that veganism is a diet, and a significant number of self-identified vegans do as well, at what point do we get to say that it isn't? That's a tough thing. And this goes back to your point that I know you've made a number of times, is the de-radicalization of movements in general and veganism specifically as it starts to hit the mainstream.
Grumpy Vegan Granddad said he lives in Old Ham. Is that true? Or is it? Are you taking the piss, Grumpy, on that one? There used to be that joke, wasn't there, that vegans wouldn't.
I'm way behind on the comments here.
Yeah, vegans wouldn't live in a place with ham in the
Leatherhood.
Yeah,
if they changed it to cowskin, so it's at least not euphemistic.
Hampshire, that's no good. All those kind of things.
Quickly
in the island called Kill, just called Kill.
Yeah. To the point around pandemics, I'm not saying not to talk about the animal use in this link. I just think it's careful how we do it, and making it more of an animal rights point versus a preventing humans getting sick on its own point. I guess is really the point there. Plant only diet is something that Elliot's mentioning, which I think is a good way to do it. I think that plant-based can have a wide, because we've seen people that's the use of the word plant-based and it's not actually vegan. What most people refer to as vegan, animal-free.
I must be tired. Grumpy's just come back and said that I meant Oldham. I never picked up on that because he separated the two words. I suppose no vegans can be West Ham fans then, can they?
Yeah, well, and this to me also speaks to the entanglement of animal rights and human rights, is how we feed, to your point, Roger, was it 20 to 30,000 humans that starve every hour, and but no, I forget it's every day or every hour. My stats are off on that for a while, but no farmed animal or other animal used for human consumption specifically goes hungry.
There's a great way to talk about this on the street if you get the opportunity. First of all, you need to differentiate between feed and food. But what you do to people and say, that if they come with humans are more important than other animals and this kind of stuff, you say things like, well, let's imagine there's two population explosions, and one of them is other animals and one of them are human animals, and there's not enough food to go around. Which one should get the priority for the food? And they always say, well, the humans, of course. And that gives you then the opportunity to say, yeah, but that's exactly the opposite of what happens. Because what we do is we provide feed for other animals instead of providing food for humans. And then you can make the point about, there's no farmed animal going to bed, hungry, but there's children dying of starvation. It makes them think, well, my priorities. It really makes them think, that one.
Yeah, and maybe this could probably be a whole different discussion. Michelle's just pointing at that there's a clear animal rights message in the discussion around pandemics. I'm curious what that is, because at least the way I've seen it framed, it's usually around eating animals, which is a vegetarian message, and it's usually talking about humans not getting sick from the pandemic. It's not about respecting other individuals, who and not breeding, using, and killing them. That's wrong on its own. To me, not having pandemics is a bonus of that. That's not the reason not to do it.
Is that a lot of advocates focus on factory farming when they talk about pandemics as well?
Yep. Yeah, and that's not even. Yeah, I saw that come up recently. That it was the wet markets. Obviously, factory farms aren't brilliant either, but that's easily another hour worth of discussion, isn't it? Yeah, I think this has been a good discussion, because I think there's a strong point to strategically keep the word vegan in there. I think when we completely remove it, when it's not encompassing the whole scope, because it's difficult to think of situations where we're actually addressing the whole scope of veganism because it's such a big idea. So I think maybe we could talk about the dietary aspect, the fashion aspect of veganism, the animal testing aspect, and maybe just specify it that way. Maybe that's the way around it. So we're still saying vegan, but we're specifying that it's a component and not the sum.
Hey, we've got Cranky and the Grumpy and Cranky in the same chat. That's good.
Yeah, so we'll see who's grumpier and who's crankier.
All we need now is Kim Stallwood, because he went under the name the Grumpy Vegan, didn't he? I think. And then there's a couple of Francione people who are known as the Grumpy Vegans as well.
Yep. Oh, I think it'd be hard to be in this movement for too long without being a bit cranky and grumpy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I wouldn't know.
Not that I should be telling you that, but
no, me being all goodness and light and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and to Jake's point around studies, I've just moved away from looking at studies. I think they can be incredibly misleading. And ultimately, it doesn't change our case. I mean, we know we need to do this regardless. So whether there's 1% or 10% vegans, to me, we still got to keep going, right? Yeah, well, talking about some combinations of what we can say here. So
we've got an argument now about whether grumpy people sleep better than cranky people.
Well, how do we design a poll around that one?
As well, Walt Disney would know, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah. All right. So everybody who considers themselves grumpy or cranky, if we could just start sleep journals, and then we'll compare them. Maybe rank on a sleep 1 to 10 how well you slept each night. We'll combine the information.
Michelle said that the old the word for ham used to mean settlement. It's like that in Yorkshire, and there's lots of thorps and stuff, which I think mean in the same kind of, Cleethorpes and all that kind of stuff. But
here's an interesting point from Michelle, that the pandemics are not only about food. For example, in China, humans are clearing out caves for mining where bats live. It has been shown that bat poop is riddled with literally hundreds of viruses. And I guess to clarify, for me, to me, an animal rights point isn't just an animal-centric point. It's specifically an animal-centric point centering around them and their rights as individuals. So that's kind of a step beyond when I say it's difficult to frame the pandemic stuff around animal rights. That's specific. I don't mean in a rhetorical sense, but I agree. There's a huge wide range of animal use that could be linked to. I mean, anytime we interact with them and their environment, there's a good chance we're going to muck stuff up, isn't there?
Also, interesting because I mean, obviously the outbreaks in the mink farms in North America were interesting because apparently it kind of jumping backwards and forwards in the sense that I think the humans initially gave it to the minks, and then they kind of passed it around amongst themselves, in which time it mutated within the minks, and then it came back to humans to the extent that they were really panicking about that because they thought that this new strain might mean that they've got to start with the vaccines all over again. So that was a real kind of scare. And also bird flu has been announced in Ireland this last week in a free range turkey farm. So again, the intensification is not necessarily the issue. It's more to do with interaction between humans and other animals, and the fact that, I mean, that we kind of interfere with them sexually. We're transporting their secretions all over the place, bits and pieces of them, semen. I mean, like it's ridiculous. I mean, they even used to do things like, for prize bulls and prize horses, they would inject the semen into rabbits and send them to Australia, for example, on a plane, because it was cheaper to send a rabbit rather than a bull or a horse. I mean, we're just messing with all kinds of dangerous stuff here. It's like we've made the world into a laboratory. We're just splashing stuff around.
Yeah. We and I think there's a common human hubris to think that we can kind of come in and control these things. I mean, how many times have we, even in vegan spaces, talked from a conservationist perspective, thinking we can do this, and it'll fix things. And it's like we just need to let nature do its thing. And it's and
then obviously that leads straight into the negative utilitarian thing about controlling, so-called wildlife, free living beings.
With only 1% vegan, I think we've got a lot of work to do in the human space before we go into the other animals space.
I'd say probably right there, I think.
Free living beings and the rest of it. Just to close the loop on this topic, Linda was teaching for 3 years. They wanted kids to see how aluminum cans were made. The next video was factory farming, and I let it play. Fired 17 hours later. So that, and I suspect that was probably driven by the parents. And then, I mean, obviously, I don't know all the circumstances, but you can see the loop here. The kids go home, they talk to the parents talk to the school administrators, and all of a sudden a tremendous amount of pressure is put on the schools. So it's, how do
That was all the problem. When we started doing school talks, we consulted with Animal Aid, from Ireland back to England, as it were, and they have a lot of trouble with access, and the fact that they're in what is it called, loco parentis, so they are kind of acting as parents, the school, and so if you teach them anything that's too controversial, especially if you get the kid going back home and go, right, mum and dad, I'm now vegan, that's going to cause a lot of trouble, and so there is that. What type of cans did you say that was there, Jeremy?
Does everyone? There's a good group of us here. Does everybody? This is now documented on the internet forever. Are we seeing the abuse that? Good thing neither of us campaign against abuse, because I get so much abuse for my American dialect on this show. I tell you what. Would you prefer me to say aluminium? There's some interesting etymology about that, because I've looked into it.
Well, I'm from Yorkshire, and there's that joke about the steel works, saying what do the steel workers sing at Christmas, and it's kind of aluminium. But it doesn't work with aluminum, does it?
Forgive me for pronouncing words phonetically the way they're spelled. I apologize. Well, I think you're getting, I'm about 10, 15 minutes behind on the comments, but you're getting really good feedback on your Christmas idea. It looks like Pamela supports it. Grumpy Vegan Granddad says that they'll be isolated, so you might have a guest there. I know I'd be happy to take part.
Yeah, you can come on screen, Grumpy. So
yeah,
we got that idea really from watching one of Grumpy's videos. I think you just put the link in the comments, and anybody then can end up in the waiting room. And I suppose then you've got the option of bringing them in or not, depending on who they are, I guess. Kind of, not Grumpy Vegan Granddad, he's not coming in, no way.
Yeah, I mean, what? So you think 6 hours? You can do 6 hours? I guess today was a good test run for you.
No, not on my.
You've done about 6 hours straight today. I can see your cat friend just sitting on the chair for a portion of the 6 hours, just them looking at the camera.
Well, she
Hey, we might as well include everyone, right? It'd be specious to keep her off camera.
she's been scratching me all day. She's been scratching me, so I think she's not very too happy. But I mean, like Vegan Gaze did a 5-hour one.
Oh, so you just want to do 1 hour more? I see what it is. It's a bit of a competition, aren't you?
Nothing to do with it. I'm like,
Was
dear Guinness Book of Records. Yeah, no, it's not that. No.
Well, I think there is something to be said for, because I think you were mentioning midday for about 6 hours, because then you could include the eastern part of the world, your Australias, your New Zealands, and Eastern Asia, and so forth, because that's kind of when they're going to bed, and then obviously that would carry over nicely for the rest of the world too, so everyone could take part if they wanted to.
Yeah, I'm going to canvas to get some kind of, as it were, guests to kind of drop in and out and stuff, just to kind of liven things up for when everybody else is flagging a little bit. And you can take over for an hour to give me a break, maybe, Jeremy.
Yeah, just flap.
Did you see the look in his eyes there, folks? Did you see? No chance, mate.
Just tag me in. Well, here's an interesting point Jake's making, which I think is worth addressing. That actually is, if the veganism is redefined, if it would actually need to be split into two movements, one for animal rights and one for veganism. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'd be opposed to that, of course, I suppose, on the grounds that I talk about the vegan animal rights movement, and going back to the pioneers, they talked about. It's fairly clear that they had an animal rights or animal liberation orientation and thing, and I think that's an interesting part of the history, because Donald Watson didn't do a great deal with regard. Watson was in catch up. He was dealing with the fact that some of the early vegans were dying and that kind of stuff, and so he had to concentrate.
I bet he regretted that in hindsight. That was a catch-up pun.
Oh, was it? and so Cross said,
yeah.
Well, we don't have a good definition of veganism. We've got a definition of vegan diet, but not veganism. And so they started working on that. But now we're into the 1950s by now, and so Watson kind of had to kind of catch up. And in fact, some people claim that Leslie Cross did a bit of a coup in the movement, but Watson said that's not true.
Yeah, I think obviously we don't want to lower the bar, but I do think when we can unify on a message, that what I would like to see is a really clear message, and then for the people that align with that message, let's get that movement together, which I don't think we're even there at this point. But maybe I have some of the conversations we've been having on the show to blame for that. I don't know. It makes me a bit skeptical. But I think there's been some great dialogue around here. I mean, I think to me the takeaway from today is if we're going to talk about veganism and diet in the same breath, to make sure that we're talking about it as an aspect of veganism and not the entire picture.
Well, in dietary terms, it's in the definition in that.
What do you think about vegan Potterhead here? What are your opinions on this whole saying ex-vegans, if they weren't really vegan in the first place?
Well, I think that's empirically true most of the time when you look into it. In fact, I'm doing a live stream with Michelle this Friday coming, and we want to talk about a couple of things. And one of the things I want to talk about is eating disorders, and see if we can tease that out in a very kind of careful, nuanced way. Because I know for a fact that some people working in mental health institutions will be very wary if somebody self-identifies as a vegan on the grounds that it's a way of cutting out certain types of food groups, so-called, from their diet straight away, and so there's an association in mental health circles that veganism and an eating disorder are linked.
It starts to be dangerous claims making there, I think. Yeah,
some of the ex-vegans seem to be people who probably had pre-existing eating disorders. So I think it's a topic you've got to be very careful with. At the same time, I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that you don't want to be an armchair dietitian on those ones. It's good to get the experts in on those discussions. Just back to the bat topic. it sounds like Michelle is contemplating doing a video around that. So maybe I leave that to that discussion because there is more than just the consumption part of that, which is probably a good way to talk about the wider forms of animal use. And yeah, the bird flu thing's an interesting one for me because I know at the sanctuary I supported in the past, when there's bird flu issues, we couldn't let the birds out, and we have to do netting over their enclosures and the rest of it. And even birds who are at sanctuary, are confined even further, just basically to protect the investments of farmers, i.e., other birds from getting sick. Let the birds out.
It's
Starting to get delirious. Should we leave it there? I think I know I flicked through a lot of these comments. I think there's several live streams probably wrapped up in this one.
Yeah, when they talk about things like bird flu and in terms of foot and mouth and this kind of stuff, they do this thing called a contiguous cull, and so they kill all the other animals on the farm, and then on also all the farms which are connected to that farm. It's really interesting from a kind of anti-speciesist point of view. If we dealt with COVID that way, all your neighbours have to go as well, as it were. It's an interesting one in that sense, because obviously they treat other animals vastly different because they don't have any moral value.
Yeah, and that to me is be it pandemic or any other single issue, as it were. We need to attach that moral value, whether it's rights-based framing literally or inferred. I just think it's got to be brought back to the individual. That would be my point around that. And same with veganism. I mean, that I know for me is why I wouldn't want it to be associated solely with a diet, because I think that loses the animal-centric focus, which is, to me, I know why I'm vegan. So, all right. Well, I think we've covered a lot. That was a bit of a blitz through that, but
we're overtired. I mean, we're over time.
I have no excuses. This is your fourth live stream. I should be ready to go for another 3 hours to catch up with you, but showing us how it's done today. And yeah, like good warm up for the Christmas live stream. And don't forget our regular team edition will be tomorrow. Really important topic, that one. We're going to be talking, actually, it's going to overlap a lot with your Christmas episode, and some of the themes discussed today is navigating the holidays as a vegan, especially with non-vegan friends and family, how to navigate some of those situations, and just kind of navigating the trauma that I saw somebody mentioned Claire Mann's book Vistopia, but just those trauma we face as animal advocates, and specifically around the holidays, I think that can be particularly intensified. I know for me, meals where other animals' bodies are more on display is a bit more visceral. So I think that there's something there maybe to unpack a little bit, but it's just, a lot of the holidays is, in the UK having the turkey and the rest of it. So
I think it's probably even more traumatic for a North American perspective because of the idea of calling that holiday Thanksgiving. That really rubs it in the vegan noses, doesn't it?
Well, and there, Thanksgiving, that's, from a human perspective, you get into the Native Americans, and they basically, it's washing over a genocide of a group of people. And then obviously you have the animal loose linked on top of that, which, anybody interested in those topics, I highly recommend David Nybert's Animal Rights, Human Rights book to talk about, because he does a terrific job looking at these things developing side by side, but obviously, in his words, entangled, because they are. And just knowing how they're entangled, I think, can help us make us better animal advocates.
Yeah, his follow-up book. I can never remember the name. I can see it, but I can't see the title. Where's my other specs? His follow-up book goes through that story of the kind of the entangled nature of the oppression of other animals and humans side by side, colonization, this kind of stuff, in much more detail, on different continents and everything. In fact, I've got a podcast about it. If people want to hear that, it's a good one.
Great, yeah. Maybe we can link that afterwards. Well, just so we've got to come back and do this again tomorrow, and I don't want to wear you down too much. Maybe
shut it down.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been a great session, and really just want to keep these going. So we're committed to do these every week, and really been enjoying watching this grow. And it's not just about us; it's about everyone who joins us each session. So let's keep doing what we're doing, and keep building this community and exploring these ideas.
You dreamer, you.
Try. See everyone tomorrow, 6 p.m. UK time.